You're watching The Source on CNN Philippines. I'm Pinky Webb. Our guest today, Simularity CEO Liz Derr. Liz, good morning to you, and thank you so much for your time. I'm going to start with this already. What is called this multispectral satellite images of anchored ships in the Union Banks in the Spratly Islands? Please tell us, just for context, what do these images actually tell you, and what can be seen through these satellite images?
So multispectral images means that the satellite collects readings within the visible spectrum, but also in various bands outside of the visible spectrum. And chlorophyll fluoresces in one of those invisible bands, and we are able to read that from the satellite imagery, even though you can't see it with the human eye, and use that to tell where the chlorophyll is.
Okay, so in summary, what have they shown?
So very basically, what we've shown is that there's an awful lot of plant life represented by that chlorophyll right next to all those ships that are in the Union Banks. Now, generally, plants don't grow next to ships, so it's there's only a few interpretations that it could be.
Okay. Also, just to add to that, there obviously are limitations to these images. What can not be seen through these images?
Well, it's very difficult to identify the nationality of the ships with these images. Obviously, there's a lot that we can't see because there's 10-meter resolution on these images. So anything smaller than 10 meters, we can't see.
Okay, so let's talk about the ships that are seen. From what I read, there were about 200, if I'm not mistaken, over 200 ships anchored in the area, in the Union Banks area. And on an average, was there some sort of, is there a calculation on how much waste, human waste, is actually dispersed at sea?
Right, we did a calculation on that, and it's about 1 ton per day for the 236 ships that are there in the Union Banks as of June 17th.
1 ton?
1 ton.
Okay. Okay. So I'm not sure if this is a very ignorant question, but does that necessarily say or point or conclude to the fact that these ships, these 230 plus ships, don't have their own sewage system within the ships?
Typically, there are not sewage systems in ships that are meant to go in deep ocean water like these ships. So if they're not dumping it, I'm not quite sure what they would be doing with it.
All right. And let's be clear about this. As you mentioned a while ago, Liz, there are limitations to these satellite images. You can't really tell which ships belong to which country. So let's go to the controversial part of this. You already said that you were not claiming that these are Chinese ships, but if we look back to the time, sometime in March, even the Philippine Coast Guard had reports that these ships around that area were actually Chinese ships. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So it leads one to conclude, hence, that these ships that you saw through the satellite images are the same ones that were reported in March.
They sure look like the same ones from the satellite imagery, and they haven't really left. They've been hanging very close to Union Banks since March.
So we're looking at March, April, May, and June, at least more or less about 4 months. There was a reaction from our Environment and Natural Resources spokesperson, the DENR spokesperson, saying that this could actually be oil spill and not waste discharge? Can one actually tell from the satellite images?
I'm not sure I understood your question. Could you repeat it?
Our environment spokesperson had earlier said that what these show could be oil spill and not waste discharge.
So the reason we think it is human waste is that there are nutrients in human waste, like fertilizer, that help plants grow. And we see that along coastlines where there is sewage spilling happening all over the world. And this is a very well understood way to measure that and detect it via satellite. So if the nutrients are there, the plants will be there. And there really isn't anything else that's going to cause a bloom like that.
And an oil spill will not do that.
No.
Okay, just one last question, Liz. China has called this fake news and it's full of lies. In fact, they went on to say that some parties have tried to discredit them. And you have already some lawmakers wanting to really look into this report from Simularity. So I know that in yesterday's forum, you had said that it's really somehow up to the Philippine government now to counter-check what is really happening over there in the Spratly Islands.
Right. I think that the next step really is to try and look locally at the quality of the water and what's happening. And one of the reasons that we rely on satellite imagery for this is that this area is so heavily militarized that it's very difficult for anybody other than the folks on the Chinese ships to get in there and measure the water quality.
Simularity CEO Liz Derr, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us here on The Source. I'm Pinky Webb. You're watching CNN Philippines.